Today we're going to talk about my functional planning in the Hobonichi Cousin 2025. So this is the January start Japanese edition, and it's in the Midori clear cover standard for the A5, of course. Yeah, so this is fully functional, not very decorative, so, just so you know what you're getting into. So the yearly calendar I use as a calendar, and I mark personal dates from 2024 here, and I will continue to do that throughout the year. I have this index tab to mark what month I'm on, because I'm notoriously bad at that for some reason. The yearly calendar index spreads, I'm not sure what it's actually called, but I do use this as an index, and I'll get into how this works once I explain how I use my daily pages. My monthly spread I use as a calendar. So I note down events, appointments, multi-day events, or if I'm traveling, if I have people visiting and staying with me, I note that down with this line here, and I do that for my leave and time off work. So that's really easy to find and just to see at a glance. I also note down the books that I started and finished. And whenever I run out of space on the actual date itself, I just find an empty date, basically, note that down there, and then put an arrow to, where it's supposed to be. I also note down my bills with these letters. They're very intuitive, so they're not like special symbols or anything, but they do correspond with how I categorize my budgeting and expenses. But yeah, it's very simple. It's like R for rent, for example. And I also note down new pen days, which I think in the community means when you buy a new pen or like a fountain pen. But I just use it to note down when I last refilled my pen, which is I want to say Uniball 1. So it is a gel pen in the 0.5, and I love it. It's very bold. It dries pretty quickly. It's not as smudgy as like the Sarasa, which I used to use, and it's pretty consistent. And I also use an index tab to mark what day I'm on within the month, because I'm also bad at tracking that. The sidebar I use to track my expenses. So these are non-essential expenses. I call them my pocket money expenses. And I note down all of my expenses in like expense logs and whatnot, but these are the only things that I really need to keep an eye on. And, it tells me whether or not I should spend again on a thing that's coming up, or like something on my wish list, because I've already, spent on all of these fun things so far. This is sorry if you heard that. There's traffic and neighbors and whatnot, but this is migrated from 2024 because I don't know about other people, but I need to refer back to when I last made a certain appointment or paid a bill. So this is really useful information as the year progresses, and that's why I have my full December calendar migrated into here. But this is, the actual current months, and we're only on the 4th, but I've already got some expenses, some appointments, and books started and finished. But that's how I use my monthly spread. This is my weekly spread. As you can see, I divide this into 2 sections. So the bottom is my day-specific sections, my daily sections, and the top is my non-day specific items. So those are all tasks. Sorry, my neighbors are really loud. Those are all tasks that I categorize into different columns or sections. So some of these are different ongoing projects that I have, and some of these are more consistent from week to week. For example, my correspondence column It's things like phone calls, emails, messages I need to return. Miscellaneous has a lot of chores and errands, but the rest of these are different projects that I'm working on. So I just put down the project on top and then have the tasks, within the columns. And if there's a task that relates to another one, I just put down this arrow. What happens is usually finishing this task actually, means I have to do a different thing like that pops up right after. So that's why I have a lot of these arrows. I also note down my working hours on the timeline. I think this is maybe less useful if you have a consistent 9 to 5, but my working hours fluctuate, so that's why I note them down every week because they change. And I also note down appointments or events that are timed, again, on the timeline. So I just put a circle and then the actual event. I don't actually have that this week, but I did get sick, so I noted down what times I took my meds because I had to, and that's what that is. And on the daily section, I note down day-specific tasks. All the events I note down at the top of this little section usually, and I underline that. And I also note down package tracking. I do a checkbox and then the item itself, the package, and then obviously check it off when it comes, or if it doesn't, I will migrate it into the next week. I also note down books I started and finished. Usually, as soon as I start a book, I note it down here, and then when I finish it, I also note it down here, but I don't put that into my monthly spread until I actually finish the book, because sometimes, I start something, couple pages in, couple chapters in, I realize it's not for me, not my jam, or just it's not good, and I drop it, and I don't bother putting that in my monthly because I don't bother putting that in my reading journal. But just in case it's a book that I end up liking and continuing and finishing, I do note that down because I sometimes just forget when I started it, and that is something that I like keeping track of in my reading journal, so I make sure I have the information here. I also keep track of my expenses. So I put down the letter. Again, this is just the category that it falls under in my budgeting. The item itself, which is highlighted with a gray tombow, and then the amount. So for my tasks, I use a circle and then I fill it in when it's done. But again, for packages, I use a check mark. For expenses, I use the letter of the budgeting category. And I do sometimes note down additional income if I have them, and I use a plus sign that I circle. So I keep track of these expenses because on the sidebar here, I have my remaining budget for the month. I put all of the categories here and then the budget itself underneath each one. And if it's purple, it means I'm under budget, so I still have this amount left that I can spend on it. And then if it's gray, I'm over budget, so I'm in the red, I'm in the negative. At the end of the week, usually I total up all of these expenses for, each of their respective categories, and then note down the total underneath each budget, and then I subtract that from the budget, and then that new amount is what I note down in the week after that for, the remaining budget for the rest of the month. I've said budget way too many times now. But I also use this index tab to mark what day of the week I'm on. So that's how I use my weekly spread. Very functional for me. Whenever I have time to run an errand, whenever I continue a project, I can find what I need to do very easily. And of course, this is very clear what day each section is for. Let's now go into the daily sections. But before that, I will talk about how I used the turning the page to a new year spread. Honestly, I didn't know what to use this for, so I put down my markers. So it's those letters for my budgeting and that I use for my monthly and weekly. Again, super intuitive, but just in case, I guess I put them here. What I actually did need was the markers for my yearly calendar where I note down some personal dates, because those are just colors, they're not letters, so I don't know what that means, or I mean, I do know what that means, but in case I forget, I guess I put them here and just decided to also note down the rest of my markers. So these are for my index spreads, and I will explain that when I get to the index section. So for my daily pages, for section 1, I used it for reference notes. Basically, I used to call it my everyday logs. It's things I refer back to often. But what I found is, especially in this book, the way I've set it up, most of that is just budgeting. So it's where all of my budgeting and expense logs live. So I just titled it Budget and Expense Logs. But for the very first page, I have this grid layout guide that was inspired by Rocky Paper Scissors Co. I want to say is the name of her channel. I'm sure you've seen her videos. But she had this grid layout guide that I thought was genius, super helpful whenever I set up a layout in my daily pages, especially in my reading journal. I always have to count like how many boxes to make the columns that I want or the rows that I want, and it gets old really quickly. So this grid layout guide is super useful. There's a lot of lines and numbers here because I know usually what kind of layouts that I'm looking for, all the different kinds, so I just kind of noted all of them here. But I did mark the ones that are most frequently used or needed in blue and red, so those are the quarters and halves and the 3 columns and 3 rows. That's what that is, and the rest of this section is my budgeting, so I won't be showing that. Definitely let me know if you want me to share how I do that. I can definitely make like mock spreads, but I'm not going to be showing you my actual finances, so let's skip that. Right, so the second section is my miscellaneous section. I found that in my previous book, I actually went to my miscellaneous section quite a lot, since it is just for any notes that don't fit any of the other sections. So I come here a lot, so I decided to put it pretty early into the book. That's pretty close to halfway into the book, so really easy to flip to, and that's what I have here. Just some miscellaneous notes. I have a pencil board here, and then we flip through the next section, which is the first type of projects. So let's call this project A. I allocated 3 sections for project A, so that's 3, 4, and 5. So from March until May. I use 3 for my overview project notes and 4 and 5 for my current project notes. So if you're not familiar with my system, one of the problems that I was trying to mitigate is notes getting broken up or like spread out across your book, and then getting separated by unrelated notes. For example, I write notes on project A. This is for, a regular bound book, or at least the one that I was using. I think I was in the Midori A5 and A6. I write project notes, and then I need to go grocery shopping. I write my shopping list. I read a book, write my reading journal, and then I continue my project, except now that I've continued my notes, that's separated from where I left off last time by like 2 shopping lists and 3 reading journal entries, and it's really cumbersome to flip back and forth when I'm actively working on it. But here the idea is whenever I continue project A, I can flip straight to section 4 when I continue on. So I do usually have multiple projects going on even within this one type of project. So project A1, I flip to section 4, project A2, I flip to section 5, and pick up where I left off without having to deal with those unrelated notes in the middle. Hopefully that makes some sense. But I do need these this one section, which I call the overview section, to note down more big picture notes. So I do sometimes have to write super quick short notes for basically upcoming projects that I'm not currently working on. And so that's what this first section is within the Project A section months. And then 4 and 5 is where I keep in-depth current project notes. And I've migrated some reference information that I keep in all of my books here in the first few pages of my overview section. And that's a paper size guide, some instructions, and some reference information for projects I have this year as well that I won't be showing you. So that's what this is, and this is my current project 1, A1, and this is a current project A2. I just have the 1 for now because the year has just started. But this is just a little calendar for how many days left I have on this project and my progress. Let's flip to section 6, which is June. And this is for my second type of project, so project B. This is a long-term project, so I have a schedule here, and usually I keep track of notes, the progress of each kind of installment within project B, all the stuff I need to do, all the stuff that other people are doing who are involved with it. So that's what this is. So pretty straightforward. And finally, we get to July, and this is my reading journal. Last year, I allocated 2 months for my reading journal and then had to overflow into the last 3 months of my book, so in total 5 months-ish. To be fair, I did not use that final month, so maybe 4 months-ish. I started the book, this was a spring cousin, but I started it in May. Obviously finished in January, but this year I'm prepared for all of my reading notes, so I actually allocated like the last 6 months of the book to my reading journal. It does make up the bulk of my book. So I allocated July until December, so it's this whole second half of the book basically is my reading journal, and it starts here in section 7. So this is my TBR. I did make it nicer than last year's TBR spreads, so I'm hoping that I'll pick up more books from this list because for some reason I just keep not picking up these books. I think I only knocked off like maybe a dozen less maybe from my TBR last year and just read like random books that I found. So this was migrated from my 2024. And obviously I only migrated the ones that I still want to read and the ones that I haven't read, obviously. But yeah. And then I have spreads for the books I read in 2025. I titled this 100 books in 2025 and, set up 100 little books. But it's not like a goal or anything. I just know that I won't read more than 100 books, if that. So I just set that up so that it's easy for me to fill in every time I finish a book. And after that, I have a series tracker. Not because I want to complete series. I just think it's interesting to see what series I read in the year. And then I have the actual journal entries themselves. So now that I have explained how the daily pages work, or what I use them for, let's actually go back to the index spreads. So here, as I explained, I put the categories of each section up here. So budget and expense log, miscellaneous, overview project notes, current project, and current project. This is the name of project B. And my reading journals. I've only put this one part in pen, obviously, because this is the only section I filled out so far. I'm sure this will also be my reading journals, or my reading journal entries, but it's just in pencil right now. And 10 to 12, I'm sure will also be my reading journal. I'm like quite confident, but just in case I need to overflow any of my other notes, usually my project notes will need to overflow into other months. I've got that here. though I'm sure that won't be necessary. And I also have these markers on top. So obviously I put the actual items in the index itself, and then I mark those items with these markers. So on the far left, I put an R for reference, and then I fill in that column for the item if it is reference information. I make use of this column next to the dates. I think they're the days of the week, I have to assume. It's in Japanese. But since I don't use that, perfect place to put R because it's easy to find. And then on the far right, I have a chevron sign, and that's for when those nodes continue on a different non-consecutive page. So if I have something on 3-4 and then it doesn't actually continue on the next page, it continues in like 318, I'll fill in this chevron column for 3-4, and then I'll just try to find that title or the item within the section, and then I'll find it easily. In my experience, it's super easy to find things in these index spreads the way that I've used it, because it's already so organized, and there are these markers that are very helpful. So I'm not super concerned with having to find notes that continue on a different non-consecutive page, but that will definitely help even more. So these markers are different for each section. I don't really need anything aside from reference and the chevron sign for budget and expense log and miscellaneous, so if anything comes up, I'll add them on there. But for example, for my overview project notes, I have C, for example, for completed, so I know when something is completed. I have D for draft, if something's drafted. For this, I have E for edited, R for reviewed. So just looking at this index spread, I know the status of my projects, their progress. It makes things easier to find. If I know what I'm looking for is completed, I just look for the items that have C filled in. Or, conversely, if I know that it's not completed, then it's something where C is not filled in. Hopefully that makes sense. Same goes for my reading journal. C is for completed, D is for DNF, M is for monthly spread, because I also do monthly spreads in my reading journal, but January has not ended yet, obviously. It's just started, so I don't have one yet there, but that's what N stands for. So this is all very intuitive. It's not hard to figure out what letters stand for. That's how that works. And it's very functional. It's also why I choose the Japanese cousin instead of English. If I'm not mistaken, in the daily pages, instead of it saying 8/15, it says August 15. And since I don't use this for like daily journaling or anything, I do think of these pages as being in, for example, for 14. And I remember that's where things are. That's kind of how I think of the page numbers. Like for 14 is a page number, 2-1 is a page number. Not that I need to remember that because that's just the first page of the second section. But yeah, super helpful, super functional. On the bottom here, I did not use the section very well at all last year. I tried goals, I tried deadlines, I tried planning, and they just weren't really functional. I also had things happening in life where I stagnated on a lot of projects, so maybe that was also part of it. But this year, I started using this as a Gantt chart, and honestly, I'm really excited to use it this way. I think this is super useful. Very helpful for me to visualize what I have coming up, how much time I have to finish something, and how much time I have left. So that's what I've used this for. I did put this in pencil, so I hope you can see it on camera, but I just put down, the name of the project and then filled in the time I've allocated for each of that, or not that I've allocated that time personally, but how the deadline and like how much time I have left. Although obviously some of these are personal time management. But yeah, it's just a Gantt chart. I haven't used Gantt charts all that often, so if anyone has any suggestions on how I can make this even more functional, how I can use it properly, that will be very useful, and I would very much appreciate that. I think I'll fill it in pen, or just write over it in pen once it's actually accomplished, once it's finished, or like fill it in or something. But yeah, that's how I'm using this bottom section, and I'm really excited about that. So let's actually go to the back pages of the Cousin. If you're not familiar, the Cousin has all of these extra pages in the back, though I'm sure you know if you're here. But yeah, I never use these like extra notes pages, obviously, because my entire daily section is notes, but I'm not sure what I'll use this for. Maybe if I just need extra pages. But I use this timetable as a tracker for the authors that I read, because I read a lot of books from the same authors and I really want to branch out and read new authors. So hopefully wanting to fill out all these little boxes will motivate me to pick up new authors. I did get to like around this area, I think, last year with my authors read, so not bad. I think that makes up, like 49 authors or something. But actually, I forgot to fill in the authors that I have read. I think I've read like 2 different authors this year. Because I have had, cozy reading days early in the year. So I need to fill that in, actually. But that's what this is for. I did put down authors read here. I don't bother, like, blacking out or, like, using correction tape over the headlines, the titles from the book itself. Like, it just kind of blends into the background for me. So I just leave it. I use the graph paper for tracking how many books I read every month and how many pages I read. I'll track that from month to month. And on the bottom, at least for last year, I did fill it in with reading stats from my story graph. Definitely let me know if you want like a flip through of my 2024 book, because it has all of my reading stats, like graphs, on this page of that book. But again, it's very functional, so it's not very decorative, or not very decorated. So I don't know how interesting it'll be, but that's what I used it for last year, and will continue to do that this year. Same goes with this. Same as last year, I'll have my top 12 books of the year, which I can't really fill out until the year is finished. Makes my fingers itch. I want to fill it in soon, but obviously the year needs to end for me to know what my favorites are. And I use my 100 for my wish list. The idea is I only have so much space to put on my wish list, and I cannot purchase anything unless I put it in my wish list. And the hope is that it'll curb my spending. And you know what? I think it'll work. I'm optimistic. I do have some items that I migrated from 2024, and actually that was really fun, or like it was nice to do, because some of the items I had on there I let go of, and it was very freeing, and then some of the stuff I have on there I still really want, and I moved them in here. But yeah, I put a little check mark in the box if I purchase it, but so far so good. Granted, it's only the first week of January. But yeah, that's what I use that for. This, I think, is a doodle a day, or like a doodle page or something. I don't really doodle. I can't draw or anything. I know the point is that it's supposed to be really easy to copy, but I don't think I'll be doing that. I do think it's really cute, and I actually had this idea of making it into a little like fun to do, a treat yourself page. So basically, I treat each doodle as an activity, and then I fill them in, color them in when I do it. For example, there's a suitcase doodle here, and maybe if I travel, I fill that in. There's a flower doodle here, and maybe I treat myself to a bouquet of flowers, and then I fill that in, which, I do from time to time, but I haven't in a while, so these will be fun treats for me. But to be honest, some of these are less obvious, like the bunnies here on the bottom, and I don't know what activity that would be. So if I do that, I need like a place where I can note down what each doodle means, like what activity I did to actually fill that out. And there's not like space on this page. So I don't know if I'll do that. I really want to. I think it's a really cute idea and really fun. But to be honest, I don't know. I don't know. Oh, there's like a haircut here. I really want to do this, but we'll see if I actually do. I have like such a completionist mindset. If I start it, I'm gonna be so determined to try to do all of these things, which could be a good thing, but I don't know if I need that this year in my life. Maybe I can make sure that are like tiny activities. You know, getting a haircut isn't that bad. Maybe, yeah, there's like a cup of coffee. Maybe if I have a really good cup of coffee, I can fill that in. If I find a nice coffee shop. Yeah, I really want to do this, but I'll let you know if I do and how I find a way to note down what each doodle means. This is a very cute thread that I cannot read. Another cute thread or page, I guess. I don't know what this means. I really should just translate this and try to figure that out, but I don't use it for anything right now. So my gifts page. I don't keep track of the gifts I give and receive. So I use this actually as a savings tracker. I have a post-it note here because I'm covering up some personal information. But basically I put plus minus amount and then some savings information. I'll put the savings actually here. This is like my bank, basically, my different accounts. And I'll put down the amounts here and the amounts that it has decreased or increased from month to month, savings wise. And I think this will be really nice to look at. It's something I have always tracked. I've always wanted to keep a better track of than I have been doing. So I'm really actually excited to use this. I probably won't be showing this anymore after this, once I fill it out. That's what that's for. And this post-it is just to cover up some personal information. Which, speaking of, there is an addresses page and like a personal information page, which I did fill out with addresses that I often need and, personal information. So I won't be showing that, but that is in the back. And I also have these index tabs just tucked in here and clipped on with this paper clip. And I have some used post-its that I don't want to throw out or anything, so I just paste that on there. And sometimes I do need a post-it to keep my place on a certain page while I'm flipping back and forth or something, whatever. I can just grab one of these, stick that on there, and then once I'm done with it, put it back on here. But yeah, that's how I use my Cousin. And I don't use tabs, permanent tabs. But the Cousin has these colored tabs, and I know where my project notes are. I remember what these sections are, since in my mind they're so clear and they're so intuitive. Not to use that word again, but things I need to refer to a lot of my expense logs always in the first, miscellaneous always on the second, always have project A, and it always spans 3 months or 3 sections, so they're always here. Project B is always here, and I know these are all my reading journal entries or sections. So I don't tab out the weeks or the months or the start of each section or anything, but I do tab off my place within each section. So for example, I tab off where I am within the reading journal. So that's what it is. And because I know what these sections are, I put the tab in the place of where that colored area is. I hope this makes sense. But yeah, that's what I do. I just tab off where I am in the section for the places where I need to flip to often. So my current project, for example, I need to flip to often. And that's it. And I also, of course, tab off my current weekly and my current monthly, because that I actually do need tabs for that. I also tab off my index, but not as a tab. I just fold the tab in. Hope that makes sense. But it's just so I can see when I'm peeking at the like edge of the book that that's where the index page is. And I've always done it. It's in the early pages of the book, obviously, so it's not like I need to do that, but I think I'm just so used to it because I did this in my last book that for a while I didn't do this, and I kept being like, where the fuck is my index page? Because I do use it a lot. Like I said, a lot of information is just here. I can see what I have going on, what I finished, what I still need to do, a lot of information. So yeah, I gave in and I used this folded in index tab thing. I think that's it. I will say that I used a ballpoint pen for the index section because I want to be able to highlight over it with my Tombow, and if I use my Uniball one, it'll smear like crazy. So I actually use the Hobonichi pen actually, which is the Uni Jetstream. And yeah, this is still in pencil. Like I said, I hope you can see it, but that is how I use my cousin. Hopefully that was clear and coherent. Definitely let me know if you have any questions, if there's any part of the system that I need to elaborate on. And this system does work in conjunction with how I'm using my weeks, but I'll have a separate video explaining how I use my weeks and how I've set that up. So that's all for my functional system in the Cousin, and thank you for watching.